tiny bit of what it felt like for Jews when the temple was destroyed, it's a year when we ourselves cannot gather in our own sanctuary tonight. When I saw the poem written on the whiteboard, underneath it, a date was written, March 31st, 2020. No one had touched the whiteboard since then. And even though people can walk around the campus, clearly no one had sat in that outdoor classroom teaching and learning with that whiteboard since March 31st. Sometimes it feels like the world is in a dark standstill. But it's our job, according to the poem, and especially on Tisha B'Av, to search for the hope in the midst of the darkness. And that's what we're going to do together this evening. It's traditional to study the mournful text of Eicha, or Lamentations, on Tisha B'Av, and we'll have the chance to do that in some small groups in a minute. So each group is going to be looking at a verse or two from Eicha, along with a midrashic commentary from Eicha Rabbah. And you're going to have 3 or 4 discussion questions as well. But the most important question to focus on in your group is the last one that you'll see on each group's sheet that you're going to see in your small groups. The question is, what is redeeming or hopeful about this text, or about the emotions you've uncovered in this text? If you know anything about the book of Eicha or Lamentations that we read on Tisha B'Av, you know that that question is a challenging one, because Eicha is a dark text. But you'll try to use what you know about mourning and grief, as well as what the guest house poem teaches us, that all emotions can be welcomed in because perhaps they clear us out for some new delight. So we're going to break up into breakout rooms. Seth, I think, is busy putting people into rooms. Every room is going to have one clergy person in the room so that you'll know exactly what you're doing once you're in your breakout room. And we'll come back together in about 15 minutes, and then we'll have a chance to hear what the different groups discussed. So make sure that when you're in your group, you get a chance to figure out who is going to be your group spokesperson to share with everybody else what the discussion was in your group. So Seth, are we ready to press go on the groups?
Yes, we are.
Okay. All right. We'll see you back here in 15 minutes.
Just a reminder, everybody, you have to click join when you get your breakout room.
Thank you.
Seth?
Yes.
Are people in breakout rooms now? Is that what's going on?
Yes.
What's going on in the breakout room?
They're discussing different parts of Eicha with. Yeah, I believe I assigned you to a room. You should click join, but
So it says where it says join breakout room, I should click that?
yes.
Okay.
Leslie, because Leslie was staying with him when she wasn't well.
Did you want to go into a breakout room?
And he
Anita?
just wanted it to stop. You know, because
Benzie, go ahead and join a breakout room that I just put you in. Nina, go ahead and click join to join the breakout room. Anita, did you want to join a breakout room? If so, just click the join button. people will be returning shortly from these breakout rooms and be moving forward.
All right. Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the main group. I hope you had some really valuable discussions in your breakout rooms. I know I really enjoyed it and learned a lot from speaking with the people in my group. So we're going to now have a chance, since everybody studied different texts, each group studied a different text, we'll have a chance to hear from each group. Hopefully within your group, you had a couple minutes to assign someone. In my group, I would say someone was voluntold. That they are going to share with the main group. So we're gonna, as I call on each group, the clergy person from that group will share their screen so that everyone can see the text that you're talking about, and then take a couple of minutes and share with us what your group discussed. So we'll start with Rabbi Vogel's group, which studied the source sheet entitled Anger, Shame, Pain, which was from Eicha chapter 2, verse 1. So Rabbi Vogel, will you share your screen? And is somebody from your group going to share with us?
Rabbi Jenny Romano, do you want to?
I think I was the voluntold here. So we were looking we're looking at the relationship of anger, shame, and pain based on the verse, and then the Aramaic terms in the Midrash have very similar sounds, which led us to be thinking about how are these emotions related? How does anger sometimes lead to shame, or maybe shame leads to anger, and pain gets mixed in? And we were looking overall partially at the relationship, how we can focus on one to move through, or sometimes if we are feeling one, maybe another is the kind of underlying emotion to work through. And so the moment for hope was one that we can progress through different emotions. And two, that if we can recognize that sometimes the emotion that's manifesting isn't necessarily the emotion under the surface. If we can recognize that and look at the emotion under the surface, we can move forward.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, that I think that you did a really great job finding hope in a text that is a real challenge. Anger, shame, and pain. I don't think anyone hears those words and immediately thinks what's hopeful about it. But yeah, you're right that being able to sort of progress through those emotions, identifying which emotion you're experiencing and being able to really work through it can be positive. So thank you. We're going to hear now from Chazan Stein's group, which studied the sheet entitled God Rejects the Temple, Eicha chapter 2, verse 7. So Chazan Stein, will you share your screen?
Well, it says host disabled attendee screen sharing. So I was able to.
We're going to make you let's make you, Seth, can we make him? Yeah, you're a co-host, so now you can.
Okay. All right. Now, da-da-da. Share. Okay. Who wants to speak? We had a little machloket between, was it Gary or was it Joel? Unmute yourself if you want to speak.
It wasn't me. That's all I know.
All right. I will say a couple of things.
Okay.
First of all, I'll say that we struggled quite a bit with trying to get the pshat, straightforward textual meaning of this particular midrash. It's not exactly so clear what's going on. So that might be appropriate to Tisha B'Av in the sense that it's not really a day of understanding and comprehension. It's more a day of struggle and complaint and giving voice to emotions without a lot of intellectual comprehension, perhaps. But the other thing I want to say is I did notice a little pattern in the 2 paragraphs that we took a look at. In the first one, the Jewish people is doing something that is annoying God in and through the service that they're commanded to do. The altar, the use of sacrifices, we're not sure exactly what they've done wrong, but they're using it to a wrong purpose. And then in the second paragraph, the Gentiles, the conquerors, come in and they're acting in a very inappropriate and disrespectful way within the temple, disregarding what's supposed to go on there. But both of those things are upsetting to God, both the Jewish way of trying to serve or approaching God and the Gentile way of disrespecting. God is not very happy in this particular set of midrashim.
Thank you. All right, Chazan, thank you for sharing your screen. Gary, thank you for letting us in on the struggle, the positive struggle that your group had. And, we learned from those struggles. So that's always great. Okay, I'm going to share my screen now. And Ofer, I think, will you share a little bit from our group?
Sure. I did not get to leave the breakout room in time. So I was voluntold. We talked about sorrow. This passage talks about tears and the sorrow and the pain that comes from sorrow, to a point where there is discussion here of a man whose child dies, and he says nothing else matters. He's in such pain. His kidney is failing, right? His liver is failing just from the weight of the tears. Comparing the verse, the words for the liver and being that is compared here, and in such a state of sorrow that he doesn't really care about his own health or his own well-being. And we talked about the tears and people who can't count because they say 3 evil tears, and they gave 4 examples. And the doctor who has his own mascara and gives it to his patient. But I'm sorry, that's not right. And how tears, we had a little discussion, can tears be good and bad, and my comment was, tears can stem from good and bad, but I had a bit of a problem with tears themselves being good and bad, intrinsically. And then we talked about, could you scroll down to remind me what we talked about? Oh yes. And we talked about how sorrow can lead to and can be healing and cathartic, and can bring a community together, right? You see somebody who's crying, who's in a lot of pain and sorrow, it sort of calls you to make that step to join together to help. And maybe, in this time with all this sorrow, that it's an opportunity and a call to the community to band together to get through this period of sorrow.
Thank you so much. Thanks, Ofer, for being the voluntold from our group. I think it is David Helfand's group who's going to share with us now. The sheet is entitled, I Forgot What Happiness Is, from Eicha chapter 3, verses 16 and 17.
Lynn, are you there?
I'm the voluntold. I love that. So this was this was a story, an interesting story, and a very confusing story about these bandits that revealed a secret, and they killed the son of a famous rabbi with the dust and the pebbles. And the rabbi wouldn't speak about the son. And it was like very sort of one of these rabbis' stories that you really can't, I don't think we understood. I don't know, the experts will. But basically, I think what we got out of it, one was that this idea of the broken teeth on gravel, which had absolutely no hope or any redemption in it. And the idea of, I forgot what happiness was. In both of these, there are two things. One is that it was almost like an admonition from Hashem that, if you're not following what you're supposed to be doing, you're not following your father's footsteps and so on, then really bad things are going to happen, and you're going to break your teeth on the gravel, and you're going to forget what happiness is. It was kind of like the rabbis were going like this. But the other thing was that we got out of it was that possibly the washing, which is an act of purity in several cases, and that act of purity we can look forward to perhaps purity in our lives to come. And maybe that happiness is out there in the future. But I kind of agree with Gary, who said that this is really a day of real confusion, and trying to get meaning out of the text it's a very difficult thing, particularly when you're in a mourning state. So
that's a great point, that even finding meaning when you're in the midst of mourning can be a challenge in itself. But I think your group did a really nice job of thinking, the story of the broken teeth on gravel and what it means. Just that statement, I forgot what happiness is. It's just kind of a stark statement in itself. Thank you. So we are now going to hear from Rabbi Cameron's group, who had a source sheet entitled Pouring Out Anger, studying Eicha chapter 4, verse 11. Did you have someone from your group who's going to share?
Yes. Bruce was voluntold.
I was voluntold, that's correct. And I'd also like to agree with Gary that it's a confusing day. And can you scroll up to the actual verse that we had? So the verse that we had was this one about God pouring out his wrath and kindling a fire which consumed the foundations. And so we talked about the destruction and anger involved in this phrase. And then the parable is about a king and his son's chuppah, and the son goes out and does something evil, and someone comes up, a tutor, I believe, comes up and starts playing music from the king then tears down the chuppah, and the son comes up and starts playing music from a piece of the chuppah. And the rabbis, I know I'm not doing this parable justice, but the rabbis use it to describe, at least in our group, there's one interpretation that it's describing God's mercy, because God is not pouring out God's anger on Israel. Instead, God is pouring out God's anger or is kindling a fire which is consuming the foundations of Zion, but not the people of Israel or Zion itself. There was another viewpoint in our group which asked whether there's a difference between the two, whether if you're consuming the foundations of Zion, whether that is meaningfully different in destroying two temples from consuming Zion itself. And then there was another question about who's responsible for the destruction. And if you look at the Peshat, the plain meaning of the text, it's that God is kindling a fire. But there's a second interpretation which asked, maybe it's not, which asked, why doesn't this verse blame our enemies? And then there's a third interpretation or a third question which came up, which asks, why doesn't the verse blame the people of Israel for what befell them, for senseless hatred or baseless hatred? So again, we come back to a confusing verse that can be interpreted a number of different ways, and a parable which has, we think, an attempt to make God's actions more merciful, but the parable itself is open to debate and discussion.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Bruce. Yeah, and again, I think all of you are really echoing that sentiment that this is a confusing day. And part of what's confusing about it is there are conflicting emotions involved. We're reading about God's anger, and within each group, it sounds like there was great discussion. Is God's anger directed at the people? Is it directed just at the building, the foundation of the temple? And I think that's what your text in particular was getting at. How do we know where the anger is directed? We're going to hear now from Hazan Mimi's group, Gone is the Joy of Our Hearts, Eicha chapter 5, verses 14 to 15. Hazan Mimi, will you share your screen? Great. And
all right. So we had a couple of Rabbanim. So I'm going to let Rabbi Wayne, I don't want to say if it was Levy or Levy, so you're going to say which correctly is how you state your name, and share what our group spoke about.
Thank you. Warren Levy is how it's pronounced.
Thank you.
So the text that we had from Eicha was chapter 5, verses 14 and 15. The old men are gone from the gate, the young men from their music. Gone is the joy of our hearts. Our dancing is turned into mourning. And one of the initial points that came out, Rabbi Ron Goldberg brought out a point about how when there's a loss of something, when there's a need for a transition, we can find a way to turn it into a positive, take away something that was wrong. For example, when he said that he had to stop his marathon running when his knee went bad, but it allowed him then to transition into bicycling. So as Jews, we try to find a way to lose something, we look for a replacement. So that's the positive note, that one of the positive notes that came out of our discussion. When we looked at the Eicha Rabbah and the other interpretations here, we were trying to in that juxtaposition was a parallel that I think that the author might have been trying to draw out about how the loss of dancing, the loss of singing, the loss of joy is a constriction. It's something that restricts us in our lives in much the same way that the loss of the Sanhedrin, which is represented by the loss of the old men at the gate where the Sanhedrin would meet, the court would meet. It's a loss of agency. It's a loss of our ability to express ourselves, to have some control of ourselves, and that we had to find other ways to do that, it became a mourning for us. And our mourning was our way to express ourselves, to have some kind of agency, still have some kind of power when we had loss of control. If you could scroll down to the discussion questions, I might see if there's something else that, so things that we're redeeming, imagine a world without song and dance. We lose joy. It's very difficult to live in that kind of world, so we have to find ways to compensate for it. In much the same way as others have spoken about how Tisha B'Av is a day that has conflicting emotions, and we have to grapple with both the sadness as well as keep hope for the future.
Thank you so much, Rabbi Levy. I love that concept that your group is talking about, that when we lose something, it's a chance to find something else. Whenever there's a loss, it can always be seen as an opportunity. We're going to look at one more text. This is from Cantor Jackie Rafi's group, Weeping and Laughing. This was Eicha chapter 5, verse 18.
Hi, thank you. We voluntold Ruth Ann, and I'm wondering, Ruth Ann, are you okay with this?
Yeah,
Okay.
I'll do it. What happened is everybody left the room and I was the only one left in the room and it's like, help, help. Okay, but I'm here. Okay, because, let's see, I'm gonna read from the Lamentations. Because of this, our hearts were sick. Because of these, our eyes were dimmed. Because of Mount Zion, which lies desolate, jackals prowl over it. But from what we were discussing, I'm not supposed to read the rest of this, right? But when we were discussing, we saw the destruction of the temple and the fires, and in the meantime, the Gentiles were rejoicing. And Rabbi Akiva comforts the Jewish people with optimism and tells them that we should be turning our laments into joy and reason for dancing. And I think the reason that he did this is because I think this is the interpretation that we got, guided by Kander Rafi, is that if the Gentiles can dance with joy for not doing good, Akiva goes on to say, surely we will be able to dance for joy in the future. In a way that seems like a leap of faith, but he comforts them. Rabbi Akiva comforts them, and they are comforted with his words.
Yeah, thank you so much, Ruth Ann. That's I think being able to comfort other people is such a bright spot, such a hopeful spot in darkness, and especially in this story, Rabbi Akiva's kind of being able to find the hopefulness, even in a really dire situation, being able to find the bright spot that even if people who are wicked are going to be rewarded, maybe it means that we who've done good deeds are going to be even more rewarded. So I think, yeah, definitely a nice way to find the hope in that. So thank you to all the groups who shared, especially to all the people who were voluntold to share from each individual group. We all appreciate getting to learn from you. And before we actually start saying Mariv, the evening service, and reading Eicha, I want to call your attention to one last verse in Eicha, the very last one, which says, "For truly you have rejected us, bitterly raged against us. Take us back, O Adonai, to yourself, and let us come back, renew our days as of old." The Midrashic commentary, Eicha Rabbah, that you all just studied, gives us only one sentence on this verse. And it's based on the fact that we're told that God both rejected us and raged against us. The one sentence it tells us is Rabbi Shimon, son of Lachish, said, "If there is rejection, there is no hope. But if there is raging, there is hope, as everyone who is angry is able to be calmed in the end." Eicha contains depictions of what happens as a result of so much divine anger, divine rage. We might ask ourselves why God would bring these tragedies upon us. And the commentary on this last verse tells us that we should be glad about the anger and rage. We should actually breathe a sigh of relief because of the anger and rage. Because if God had only rejected the Jewish people, we would have no hope for a better future. But when God's angry with us, it's because the relationship is ongoing, because we can repair it. You've probably experienced that, right? When you're angry with someone, it means that you actually have hope that the relationship can improve, even if that hope is buried deep under the rage. It's only once you've really given up on the relationship entirely, determined that you're done working to repair it, that the anger subsides, turning fully into rejection. We have to see Eicha not as a depiction of rejection of the Jewish people, but of anger at the Jewish people. And similarly, from our perspective, Eicha is not just a depiction of our rejection of God, but of our anger at God. It's an acknowledgement that the relationship between us, the Jewish people, and God is ongoing, not on the rocks, but ongoing, a place from which to begin to repair the damage. And that's how we find the hope. The hope that even when things are tragic and dark, it can always be the beginning of something better. It can always be the opening, the spark that causes us to innovate, as the rabbis did after the destruction of the temple, and as we have now during COVID-19. Even an angry spark, a spark of divine anger, even an angry spark can always be that opening. As our guest house poem teaches us, that we read at the beginning of this evening, that spark can always be the opening for some new delight. So with that, we're gonna actually transition to begin with. Chazan Stein is going to pray for us, with us, and Cantor Rafi is going to share her screen so that we can all follow along. Chazan Stein, are you still with us?
Yeah. Okay. Can you hear me okay?
Can I just jump in and say one thing? There is a tradition, for those of you who are comfortable with that tradition, to daven Mariv and listen to the chanting of the book of Echa on the ground, on the floor. So if any of you are comfortable doing that and are able to do it, given the challenges of your computer and the Zoom screen and everything else, we encourage that. And if you're wearing shoes, the tradition is to take off the shoes this evening through tomorrow afternoon, at least while davening.
Mm-hmm. And there's also a tradition to do it in a very quiet voice, the davening. So we'll see what happens. Okay. והוא רחום יכפר עוון ולא ישחית, וירבה להשיב אפו ולא יאיר כל חמתו. אדוני הושיע המלך יעננו ויום קוראנו. ברכו את אדוני המבורך, ברוך אדוני המבורך לעולם. ברוך אדוני המבורך לעולם ועד. ברוך אתה אדוני אלוהינו מלך המשיב ומעביר יום ומביא לילה, ומבדיל בין יום ובין לילה, אדוני צבאות שמו, החי וקיים, תמיד ימלוך עלינו לעולם ועד. ברוך אתה אדוני, המעריב הרבים.
אמן.
אהבת עולם בית ישראל עמך אהבת כי הם חיינו ואורך ימינו, ובהם נגע יומם ולילה. ואהבתך תסיר ממנו לעולמים. ברוך אתה אדוני, אוהב עמו ישראל. שמע ישראל, אדוני אלוהינו, אדוני אחד. ואהבת את אדוני אלוהיך בכל לבבך ובכל נפשך ובכל מאודיך, והיו הדברים האלה אשר אנוכי מצווך היום על לבביך, ושיננתם לבניך ודיברת בם, בשבתך בביתך ובלכתך בדרך, ובשוכבך ובקומך, וקשרתם לאות על ידיך, והיו לשותפות בין עיניך, וכתבתם על מזוזות ביתך ובישעריך. Page 266. והיה עם שמו אדוני אלוהיכם אמת באמונת חוזות וקיים עלינו ויום נפרד נפשנו ומלכותו ברצון קיבלו עליהם משה ובני ישראל לכנו שירה בשמחה רבה ואמרו כולם מי כמוך ואלים אדוני מי כמוך נדר בקודש נורא תהילות אוסף אלה מלכותך רובנך בוקע ים לפני משה זה ליאנו ואמרו אדוני ימלוך לעולם ועד ונאמר כיפת אדוני את יעקב וגלו מיד חזק ממנו ברוך אתה אדוני גאל ישראל השכיבנו אנו לשלום אבינו שמך וזקנים בעצתו שמך והגן בדנים ושמור צאתנו ובואנו לחיים ולשלום מעתה ועד עולם ברוך אתה אדוני שומר עמו ישראל לעד page 268 ברוך אתה אדוני אמן ברוך אתה אמן ואמן כי המלכות שלך היא ולא למעט ימלוך בכבוד כי אין לנו מלך אלא אתה ברוך אתה אדוני המלך בכבודו תמיד ימלוך עלינו לעם ועד ועל כל מעשיו יתגדל ויתקדש שמך רבה ויעלמה דברי חילותי וימליך מלכותי בחייכון ובמכון ובחי לכל בית ישראל בעגלה ובזמן קריב אמרו אמן יש מרבה מבורך לעלם ולעלמי עלמיה יתברך וישתבח ויתפאר ותרומם ויתנשא ויתהדר ויתעלה ויתהלל שמי קדושה בריחו לילה מן כל ברכתה ושירתה תשבחתה ונחמתה דמירן ועלמה ואמרו אמן. The Silent Amidah, page 270. שלום במרומיו הוא יעשה Shalom Aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael ve'al kol Yisrael ve'imru Amen. We now have the Kaddish Shalem, which we find on page 280. Yigdal v'yikadash shemei rabah v'yalmad yibrachirutei v'yamlich malchutei v'chayechon v'yimechon v'chayerech l'beit Yisrael b'agadav v'zman kariv v'imru amen. Yehei shmei rabah mevorach la'alam u'lalmei almaya yitbarach v'yitabach v'yitba'av v'yitba'av v'yinasei v'yitadar v'yitalev v'yitala shmei d'kudusha b'richu Leila min kol b'chatav shirata tishbachata v'nechemata tamiran v'alma v'imru amen. Titgabel tzoloton v'ruon beit Yisrael kol Shemai v'imru amen. Yehei shalom rabba min Shemai v'chaim v'leinu ve'al kol Yisrael v'imru amen. Oseh shalom b'imramav hu yaseh shalom aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael ve'al kol yoshvei tevel v'imru amen. Page 281. Aleinu l'shabeach l'adon hakol לתת גדולה ליוצר בראשית שלא עשנו כגוגי הארצות ולא שמנו כמשפחות האדמה שלא שם חלקנו כהם וגורלנו ככל המונם ואנחנו קוראים ומשתחווים ומודים לפני מלך מלכי המלכים הקדוש ברוך הוא של שמי בסדר הכתוב בתורתך אדוני ימלוך לעולם ועד ונאמר והיה אדוני למלך על כל הארץ ביום ההוא יהיה אדוני אחד ושמו אחד. We continue now on page 282 with the Mourner's Kaddish. It has been our tradition to unmute yourself if you're able to for this, or if that's not possible, then we all continue with those in our hearts and minds, thinking of those who are observing your
Got my video too now.
Okay, page 282. Yit gadal v'yit gadash
Rabah.
Lamad
Beichon of Yom Beichon, Beit Israel, Ba'agadav Zman Kariv Imru Amen. Yehei Shmei Rabbah Barach Ve'alav Ve'almaya Yitvach Yishtabach Yitvach V'Yitrom V'Yitnaseh Tadar Richu Le'ela Minko Chachata V'Shivata Tush B'Chata V'Nechamata Ran V'Ama V'Imru Amen. Yehi Yishma Rabba Min Shemaya V'Chayim Aleinu V'Al Kol Yisrael V'Imru Amen. Yaseh Shalom V'Romav Yaseh Shalom
Aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael V'imru Amen.
Amen.
Yesher Koach Chazan Stein, thank you for leading us in a somber davening of Mariv. We're now ready to read from the book of Eicha, and we will be doing a slightly abbreviated version of Eicha this evening. The first 4 of the 5 chapters are going to be somewhat abbreviated because we're joining together by Zoom. It's just always harder to really hear long pieces of text. So you'll notice that our text is somewhat abbreviated this evening, but we tried to make sure to get the real highlights in, and it should still feel like a significant portion of Eicha is being read. So the first chapter of Eicha, we have Bob Epstein, who's going to be reading, and he'll be reading verses 1 through 12. You can follow along on the screen.
Eicha Yashua Badad Ha'ir Rabatiyam Hayita Ke'almana Rabati Vagoyim Sarati Bamidinot Hayita Lamas Vachotiv Ke Balayla V'dimata Alecheya Ein la menachem mikol ohaveha Kol re'eha Bagduva Hayula le'oyevim Galdta Yehuda me'oni Umerov avodah Hi Yashva bagoyim Lo matza mahanoach Korodfecha behisigucha ben hamitzarim Darchei Tzion avelot Mibli ba'e moed Kol sha'arecha shomemin Kohaneha nehenachim Betulotecha nugod Behimarla Hayutzarehat lerosh Oyevecha shalu Ki Adonai hoga Al rov pishaeha Olaleha Al chushavi lifnei tzar Yetzei mivat Zion Kol hadara Hayutzarecha Ki ayalim Lo matzu mireh V'yelchu b'lo koach lifnei rodef Zachra Yerushalayim Yemei onya umerudeha Kol machamudeha Asher hayu mimekedem Bin Popol Ama B'yad Sar Ve'en Ozer La Ra'u Chatzarim Sachaku Al Mishpateha Et Chata Yerushalayim Al Ken V'nidahayata Kol mechabdecha chizilucha Ki ra'u ervata Gam hi ne'emcha V'tashov achor Tumata b'shuleha Lo zachra acharita V'tered pilayim Ein menachem la Re'e Adonai et oni Ki higdil oyev Yado parasar Al kol machamadeha Ki ra'ata goyim Ba'u migdasha Asher tzivita lo yavo'u b'kachalach kol amanechenachim bevakshim lechem natnu machamadehem be'ochel lechashiv nafesh re'e Adonai v'chabita Ki chayiti zolela Lo alechem kol ovrei derech Habitu ur'u אם יש מחוב כמחובי, אשר עולה לי, אשר גולה אדוני, ביום אחרון אפו.
Thank you, Bob. In between each chapter, we'll invite one of our chazanim to sing a song. Chazan Mimi will be singing Al Naharot Bavel.
Al Naharot, Naharot, Naharot Bavel. Sham yashavnu, yashavnu, gam bachinu, v'zochrenu, v'zochrenu, v'zochrenu et Zion by the waters of Babylon. We lay down and wept for thee, Zion. We remember thee, Zion.
Thank you. We'll continue with the second chapter of Eicha, read by Elihu Burl. She'll be reading verses 1 through 10.
Eicha Yair be'aparonai et bat Zion Yishlich mishamayim eretz Tiferet Yisrael Lo zachar adam raglav b'yom ha'po Ila Adonai Elo Chama Eit Konehot Yaakov Oras V'avrato Niftzarei bat Judah V'higia le'or Le'el mamlecha Yisrael V'adah V'chariah Kol Keren Yisrael Heishiv Achar Yemino Mipnei Oyev Vayivar Yaakov Yesh Le'ava Achla Saviv Zarakato Yoyev Nitzav Yemino Kitzor Ayaharot Kol Lachmedei Yoel Bat Zion Shafach Ha'esh Hamato Ayah Adonai Koyev Bila Yisrael Bila Kol Arminoteha Shechet Mitzrayim Vayerev Bevat Yehuda Tanya V'Aniya Vayachamos Kagan Sukkot Shechet Moado Shikach Adonai B'Tzion Moed V'Shabbat Vayatz B'Zamapo Melech V'Choed Sanach Adonai Mizbecho Ne'er Mikdasho Yizkir V'Yad Oyev Chomot Arminotel Notnu B'Beit Adonai B'Yom Moed Chashav Adonai Lashchit Chomat Bat Zion Nata Hakov Lo Yeshiv Yado Mibaleya ויעדר חי וחמה, יחדיו אומללו. טבעו בארץ שעריה, איבד ושיבר בריחיה, מלכה ושריה וגויים אין תורה, גם נביאיה לא מצאו חזון מאדוני. ישבו לארץ ידמו זקני בת ציון, העלו עפר על ראשם, חגרו שקים. הורידו לארץ ראשם, בתולות ירושלים.
אני מאמין, אני מאמין, אני מאמין, באמונה שלמה, בביאת המשיח, בביאת המשיח אני מאמין, ואף על פי שיתמהמה, עם כל זה אני מאמין.
Thank you to Elihu Burl for reading chapter 2 and Chazan Mimi for singing Ani Ma'amin. We're continuing now with chapter 3, which Ofer Ho will be reading verses 1 through 25.
אני הגבר העוני בשבט עברתו, אותי נהג ויולך חושך ולא אור, אך בי ישוב יהפוך ידו כל היום. בילה וצרי ואורי שיבר עצמותיי, בנה עלי ויקף ראש ותללה, במחשכים הושיבני כמתי עולם. גדר מידי ולא אצא, הכביד דחושתי, גם כי אזעק ואשבע, סתם תפילתי. גדר דרכי בגזית, נתיבותי בה. דוב עורב הוא לי, ארי במסתרים, דרכי סורר ויפשטני, זמני שומם, נערך קשתו ויציבני, כמטרה לחץ. הביא בכליותי בני אשפתו, הייתי שחוק לכל עמי, נגינתם כל היום. הצביעני במרורים, הובני לענה. ויגרס בחצך שיני, הכבישני באפר. ותזנח משלום נפשי, נשיתי טובה. ואומר עבד נצחי, ותאכלתי מאדוני. זכרון יאמרודי, לענה וראש. זכור תזכור, ותשוח עלי נפשי, זאת אשיב אל ליבי, על כן אוכיל. חסדי אדוני כי לא תמנו, כי לא חלו רחמיו. חדשים לבקרים, רמה אמונתך. חלקי אדוני אמרה נפשי, על כן אוכילו. Tov Adonai lekovav lenefesh tidreshenu.
Cantor Rafi will continue with Olam Chesed. Thank you so much to Ofer Ho for reading chapter 3 for us.
Ooh, yadadai, dai, dai, yadadai, dai. Ooh, yadadai, dai, dai, yadadai, dai. Olam chesed yibaneh, 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 yadadai, dai, dai, yadadai, dai. I will build this world from love. Yadadai, dai, dai, yadadai, dai. And you must build this world from love. Yadadai, dai, dai, yadadai, dai. And if we build this world from love, yadadai, dai, dai, yadadai, dai, then God will build this world from love. Yadadai, dai, dai, yadadai, dai.
Thank you so much, Cantor Rafi. We'll continue now with chapter 4 of Eicha. Chazan Joel Smith will chant it for us, verses 11 through 22.
כי לאדוני את חמתו שפך ארון אפו, ויצב אש בציון ותאכל יסודותיה. לא האמינו מלכי ארץ כל יושבי תבל, כי יבוא צר ואויב בשערי ירושלים, מחטאות נביאיה, עוונות כהניה, השופכים בקרבך דם צדיקים. נעו עברים בחוצות, נגועלו בדם, ולא יוכלו, יגעו בלבושיהם. סורו טמא קראו למו, סורו סורו אל תיגעו, כי נצאו גם נעו. אמרו בגויים, לא יוסיפו לגור. פני אדוני חילקם, לא יוסיף להביטם. פני כהנים לא נשאו, וזקנים לא חננו. עודנו תוכלנה עינינו, אל עזרתנו הבל, בציפייתנו ציפינו, אל גוי לא יושיע, צעדו צעדינו מלכת ברחובותינו, קרב כקיצנו, מלאו ימינו כי בקיצנו, קלים היו רודפינו מנשרי שמיים, אל ההרים תלקינו, במדבר ערבו לנו, רוח אפינו, משיח אדוני, נלכד בשחיתותם, אשר אמרנו, בצילון נחיה בגויים. שישי ושמחי בת אדום, יושבת בארץ עוץ, גם עלייך תעבור כוס, תשכרי ותתארי, תם עוונך בת ציון, לא יוסיף להגלותך, פקד עוונך בת אדום, גילה חטאותייך.
אוויר הרים צלול כיין, וריח אורנים, נישא ברוח הארבעים, עם כל פעמונים, ובתרדמת אילן ואבן, שרויה בחלומה, העיר אשר בדד יושבת, ובליבה חומה. ירושלים של זהב, ושל נחושת, ושל אור, הלא לכל שירייך אני כינור. ירושלים של זהב, ושל נחושת, ושל אור, הלא לכל שירייך אני כינור, כינור.
Thank you so much, Khazan Stein. And thank you to Khazan Joel Smith for reading chapter 4. We'll now hear chapter 5 chanted by Michelle Hoysh, and we'll be reading the entirety of the chapter because of its special ending.
Zechor Adonai mehaya lanu, habita ureyet herpateinu, nachalatenu nechefach lezarim, batenu lenochrim, yetomim chayinu ve'ein av, imotenu kalmanot, mimenu bechesef shotinu, etseinu bimechir yavo, al tzvareinu nirdofnu, yaganu velo hunach lanu, Mitzrayim natanu yad, Ashur lisboa lachem, avoteinu chatu ve'einam, va'anachnu avonotehem savalanu, avadim mashluvanu, porek ein miyadam, b'nafshenu navi lachmeinu, mipnei
חרב המדבר, אורינו כתנור נחמרו מפני זלעפות רב. נשים בציון עינו בתולות בערי יהודה, שרים בידם ניטלו, בני זקנים לא נחתרו, בחורים תיכון נשאו, ונערים בעץ כשלו, זקנים משער שבתו, בחורים מקנאתם. שבה משוש ליבנו, נחפך לאבל מחולנו, נפלה עטרת ראשנו, אוי נא לנו כי חטאנו. על זה היה דובר ליבנו, על אלה חשכו עינינו, על הר ציון ששמם שועלים הילכו בו. אתה אדוני לעולם תשב, כיסאך לדור ודור. למה לנצח תשכחנו, תעזבנו לאורך ימים. חשיבנו אדוני אליך ונשובה, חדש ימינו כקדם. כי אם משוש מאסתנו, קצבת עלינו עד מאוד. השיבנו אדוני אליך ונשובה, חדש ימינו כקדם.
Return again, return again, return to the land of your soul. Return again, return again, return to the land of your soul. Return to who you are, return to what you are, return to where you are, born and reborn again. Return again, return again, return to the land of your soul. Hashivenu, Hashivenu, Adonai Elecha, Venashuva, Venashuva, Chadesh, Chadesh, Yameinu kekedem.
Thank you so much to all of our Eicha readers this evening, Bob Epstein, Elihu Burl, Ofer Ho, Hazan, Joel Smith, and Michelle Hoish. And of course, to all of our Chazanim, our cantors, for adding in beautiful songs throughout, and to all of our clergy, rabbis, and cantors for helping to facilitate breakout rooms and really some interesting conversations that helped all of us look at these dark texts in a new way, in a way that our world today allows us to, and to help us find that hope and meaning even through the darkness. We're going to conclude our service this evening with Hatikva, the ultimate song of hope, the song of hope for the Jewish people and for the state of Israel. And Chazan Mimi is going to lead us.
So although you're muted, please join with me. I hope you have been the whole time. Kol od balevav penima nefesh Yehudi homia ufate mizrach kadima ayin letzion Sophia od lavda tikvatenu hatikva bachnot alpayim lihiotam chovshi be'artzenu Eretz Zion Yerushalayim Liotam Chovshi Be'artzenu Eretz Zion Yerushalayim.
Thanks, everyone. Hope you have an easy fast.
Yesher koach.
Thank you, Rabbi Golko, so much for organizing this evening.
Thank you for helping and being part of it.
Thanks. Good job. Yishar kochech.
Yishar kochech.